Joining us now on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline is ESPN college football insider, expert, and 1984 national champion in college football, Trevor Matich, back for another Matich Monday. And Trevor, I wish it were under different pretenses than a 7-6 loss by BYU to Northern Illinois, but here we are on Monday. What are your initial thoughts about really a head-scratcher of a game?
Yeah, Spencer, that was so good in some ways and so frustrating in other ways. And in some ways, it's kind of where BYU is right now, especially playing so many freshmen. I mean, they did some good things on offense. They made mistakes on offense that cost them the game. And all the while, the defense was largely magnificent. So there's a lot to be excited about. You can see a positive future, but the present in terms of this game was pretty bad.
Where do you start with the offensive issues, Trevor?
It starts with making mistakes. So you create negative plays that the defense doesn't force. Some of those are the unforced pre-snap penalties, and that drives the coaching staff, any coaching staff, crazy. BYU is just not good enough to overcome stuff like that. Alabama is. Alabama can have 2 consecutive false starts or pre-snap 5-yard penalties down in the red zone and score the next play. But BYU is not good enough to do that against a good defense right now. So those kinds of things are frustrating. The other thing that's frustrating is that there are too many times when plays that were there were not made. You know, I get it that they're playing a lot of freshmen. I get it that Northern Illinois has a good defense. I understand those things, and I'm not being critical of those parts of it. But when there's a receiver that's open and you're looking at him, hit him. You know, when you've got the opportunity to at least block somebody, don't fall down. There are things that are easy in a football game, and you've got to take the easy things because most things are really hard. And in this game, BYU, I think, faltered on some of the easier plays that were there to be made, and that's really what kept them from being able to do just enough to get a win.
The wheel of blame is always an interesting conversation, Trevor, and a lot of people are looking at BYU trying to establish a run against one of the nation's best rush defenses. It didn't work. Then you have Zach Wilson, who, per the passing numbers, was pretty good, but still no touchdowns to show for it. So where does the wheel of blame fall in your reality on this BYU team not getting it done against Northern Illinois?
Youth, I think. People want to point fingers at the offensive coaching staff for the play calling, for just what you said. You know, they were too conservative. They tried to run too much. But understand that you've got to fight the fight you're in, not the one you wish you were in. And the fight they were in was basically an ugly defensive battle. So how do you win a game like that? Well, let's go back to where a lot of this offensive staff comes from, which is the SEC. And there you've got traditionally great defenses, and you want to play to the strength of those defenses. That means in Alabama all those years, for example, Alabama would, you know, before Tua showed up and all of a sudden they become Oklahoma, you know, they would win on the strength of their defense. And so the job of the offense was don't blow it for the defense. Move the chains, kind of flip the field position a little bit, punt, give the defense a long field to defend. Then, hopefully, they'll get you back a short field at some point. They'll get a turnover, or they'll get enough 3-and-outs that the exchange of punts will put you in position to be able to score now on a short field, and you win a low-scoring game that way. Well, that's the game that BYU found themselves in against Northern Illinois. And the idea was to play to the strength of the defense, knowing that they would hold the score down on that side of the ball. And on offense, first priority was don't blow it. Don't give up a turnover, so now Northern Illinois got a short field and an easy score. And hope the defense can get you a short field at some point. Now, unfortunately, the BYU defense wasn't able to generate a takeaway. And that's the one real failing you could say that they had. But overall, the style of the game and the way that the plays were called were to play to that strength rather than take what is not necessarily a weakness, but their least confident area, which is all that youth on offense, and try to force things that weren't there. So I don't mind the play calling. I understand why they did it the way they did, and the truth of it is it put them in position to win.
BYU has 4 games left in the regular season. I think historically we would look at New Mexico State and UMass and say, hey, those are wins. And those teams are pretty bad this year. Do you feel like those are the BYU's good? They're going to win those 2 games and get bowl eligible, or do you question that at this point?
Well, I question every game. always, because anything can happen. Anybody can. I mean, did you question that Purdue could blast Ohio State a couple weeks ago?
Not necessarily because Ohio State's defense had been a little vulnerable, but you have said on the show, don't sleep on Idaho State, so we know the history.
I mean, we saw Old Dominion beat Virginia Tech, for crying out loud.
Well, the biggest reason that you don't sleep on Idaho State is that they're not comfortable, so that's why you don't sleep on Idaho State. UMass and New Mexico State, BYU should win both of those games. Now, will they? They've got to come and bring their A game, as always, because BYU is not Alabama. And so, those I would pencil in those wins. At Utah to end the season, it's hard to imagine a path to winning that game if Utah brings their A game, because Utah is playing lights out. Utah might win the Pac-12 this year. They are really playing well. And the quarterback, Huntley, is doing a phenomenal job. I mean, he's really elevated that position over the last couple of weeks. So BYU could win that. It's a rivalry game, but I wouldn't pencil it in as a win just yet. That means Boise State. So what happens there? Well, that's a tough game at Boise. Boise's playing really well. They've got a veteran quarterback. They fully are capable of coming with their A game. They usually do. So what does that mean? BYU's got 4 wins. If they beat Boise State, that would be great. I'd be really happy about it. But UMass and New Mexico State will get them to 6 if they win those. Here's why 6 wins is important for BYU. It's not just, elevating into a bowl after last year's debacle. It's because of the youth that's been talked about so much, especially on the offensive side. You get another 2 weeks of bowl practice, and that's like another spring practice. So just for the development of those young guys for next season, making a bowl is a whole lot more than just getting a reward at the end of the season.
ESPN's Trevor Matich with us on BYU Sports Nation for another Matich Monday. Trevor, when you look at the matchup between BYU and Boise State, the Broncos just put up 48 and went over Air Force. How does BYU, with an offense that is young and learning and is not high-scoring, stay in a game like that on the Boise Blue?
Well, I agree with Kalani Sitake when he has said here publicly after this game, they got to let it rip. It's a different kind of game than Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois' offense is really putrid. In a lot of ways, it's just really bad. So you could expect the BYU defense to hold down the score at home against that offense and then try to win a close one. At Boise State, I don't think you can count on that because they are too good, especially when you start with their quarterback, Brett Rippon. They just have too much that they can hit you with on offense, and you have to go into that game from a game planning standpoint expecting to have to keep up in a higher scoring game. Well, you don't do that by playing conservative. Now you've got to let it rip, like Coach Sitake said. Can they do that? Yeah, it's dangerous. They can let it rip, and good things can happen, and bad things can happen. It's like if you're driving on a windy road where the speed limit is 30 miles per hour and you're going 95. That's exciting. It'll be fun, and it could end up in a train wreck in some way. So, I think BYU has to take that risk in order to beat Boise State, though.
The College Football Playoff Committee rankings come out Tuesday, but we don't really care about that. We just want your top 4, Trevor. So who do you have in your top 4 right now?
My top 4 are Alabama at number 1 with Clemson as a close number 2. Clemson, my goodness, their true freshman quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, he's ahead of schedule in terms of learning the art of quarterbacking. I mean, we always knew the guy had a great arm, but a great arm is only interesting if you're standing in a field in shorts throwing through a tire. A quarterback has to manage situations under pressure, and he's been really improving in that vein, especially against the blitz. I've got Notre Dame at number 3. And number 4 is really tough for me right now. If I had to pick it, I would say number 4 would be LSU, although that probably is going to change here at the end of this week as Bama faces LSU. Georgia, I'm still a little worried about some things about their offense, and Michigan, same way. So number 4 to me is very, very fluid. Oklahoma could be my number 4 if their defense could just, put any kind of a speed bump in front of anybody. But that 4 spot is kind of fluid. So right now it's Bama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and a cast of thousands at number 4.
Trevor, I know you like to speed, but let's take it down from 95 into 30 to 60 into 30. Is that a fair compromise?
That's fine, but to be fair to me, I only go 95 in a 95.
My man.
Very good. Hey, great stuff, Trevor. We appreciate the time as always.
I appreciate it.
Trevor Matich on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. Deseret First, your values, your timeline, your financial future. And yes,